Well, I think a good starting point is to acknowledge that we've done some learning since the last crisis, and we showed this during the COVID crisis. We learned about the need to have fiscal and monetary policy working together. We learned that you need to be ahead of the markets and not 5 steps behind always. We learned about speed of response and the need for overwhelming response sometimes. So all this is good. And this has helped us very much weather COVID in a way that we would not have done otherwise if we had repeated the playbook of the global financial crisis and the Eurozone crisis. My own country suffered a lot from failures in policy during that particular period, on top of our own mistakes, of course. So the question is, have we learned enough? I think, again, one has to remember no crisis repeats itself in exactly the same way. And whatever you do before a crisis, you can never completely avoid the crisis. So here we've got a situation which started with 2 rather idiosyncratic cases. Silicon Valley Bank, a regional and kind of sectoral bank with particular characteristics, Credit Suisse with long-standing problems. These 2 banks showed failures in risk management, failures in regulatory, policy failures in the US with during the Trump administration pulling back Dodd-Frank from the smaller banks. So, it's a completely different starting point, but at the end of the day, it manifests itself in a lack of trust in the system. So the question is, where are we now, and are we heading to similar circumstances? I think it is a bit too early to know, but it's not too early to not be complacent about it. I think it's important that authorities in the US, in Switzerland, with whatever mistakes were made in the exact kind of mechanics, let's say, and in Europe and the ECB, have been on top of this. But we are in an environment where interest rates are rising, therefore bond prices are falling, and therefore it is quite likely that banks find themselves with a hole because they've invested in longer-term instruments, and that is a problem. We are in an environment of rising inflation, therefore a lot of the loans that they did on very low interest rates are problematic for them. So it is not a very comfortable environment. It's not an environment where we can sit back and say, okay, this was just 2 blips and we can continue as usual. Not at all.